Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Axiom's Workforce Management webinar series today. For all of you who've joined us before over the last, 14, 15 months, thank you so much for continuing to come back. And for all of you who have just found us, thank you for finding us and joining us today. We hope that you stay with us beyond this webinar. I'm Robin Merritt. I'm an Executive Vice President for Axiom. And we have a really hot topic today, guys. I mean, that's probably why you're here today, is to learn some really important information about this topic of conquering your labor shortage. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but everywhere you look, whether it's, okay, let's go old school, opening up a newspaper, or even logging into your local Yahoo email, your blogs, the Wall Street Journal, the business journals that the NRF, or any of your local information, there is a war on talent. There is a fight for labor. And look, we could spend the entire webinar talking about the why and the intricacies of how we got here, but that's really not what we're here for today. We are here for a couple of things. Well, actually, three things. It's really to talk to you tactically about some big items, some big ideas, those ways that you can impact and affect the labor that you currently have and the one that you want to attract. It's also to help you with alignment. You're going to need the executives in some of these changes. These are not just all very small things that you're going to do. We've got some really big things that you're going to need some help on. And the last is building the case. How do you build it? What does it look like? Who do I build it with? And then how do I deliver that? So there's a lot of really great information around this. What do we, and again, when we say conquer, it's really fighting, it's winning, it's finding your roadmap, your strategy. I will tell you, in this particular area, I feel like road mapping and designing is going to be one of the most difficult things that you've done. Usually you can say, I'm going down a workforce management journey. I've got my business needs, the vendor has their needs, and I need to make sure that I have end user capabilities and engagement. You guys, this road is going to be so twisting and turning and up and over mountains and down through the valleys. It's going to be so different. You have to be more nimble and agile than you've ever been before. So let's get started. Of course, I have with me a very esteemed colleague in the business, my president and CEO of Axsium, Bob Clements.
Hi, Robin. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. I didn't have a choice, you guys, by the way. Anyway, so Bob and I talk about this a lot because we have been spending the last 6 to 8 months starting to really feel the anxiety around the labor shortage in the labor market. And I know that all of us are dealing with it in different ways. You've been impacted. Obviously, if you're here, you're probably here because you've really been impacted for it, whether you're in retail, whether you're in the industrial industry, whether you're in warehouse management. It's everywhere we look, you're having to deal with the issues of, do I have enough people? Do I have them at the right time? I'm just trying to keep my locations open. Can I even keep the same times? Do I have the same days open? So can you fix this? Can you fix it at the level that you are in your organization? Can you really make that impact, and can you change the needs that you have? And do you know all the needs that you have? So I guess, Bob, in doing this, I'm assuming you're going to need executive support. You're going to need alignment on this.
Yeah, ultimately, regardless of what solution you pursue, this is not a solution that you as a workforce management operator are going to be able to solve on your own and with good intentions, right? Mm-hmm. There are some Band-Aids that you can do with your workforce management system and with your labor standards and your productivity, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But ultimately, to be able to solve your labor shortage, you're going to need that executive buy-in. And that executive buy-in is going to be critical because, number one, they're going to be the ones that knock down walls and remove barriers to being able to implement any solution. They're also going to give you access to resources that you might not have access to every day otherwise. It's going to allow you to go across boundaries, and it's ultimately going to give you the authority that you need to be able to act within your organization to be able to solve the labor shortage. So a lot of times when we do these webinars, we talk about executive support down the road when we talk about building the business case. But we really wanted to lead with it today because it is going to be critical for you to be able to get on top of how the labor shortage is affecting your environments today. So when you go talk to the executives, like when you talk to anybody else, you need to keep in mind the what's in it for me principle, right? You need to think about, what do your executives care about? Now, for some of you, you may have been working with your executives for years and you know them well, you know how they think, you know what's important to them. And so connecting the dots between the solution that you might have, the labor shortage, and what they care about is a really easy thing to do. But there's been a lot of turnover in retail and there's been a lot of change. There's also, the reality is some organizations, there may be a big gap that separates you and your executives. So you may not know exactly what's on their mind. So how do you address that? Well, the first thing you can do is you can do a little research, right? You can look to see what they're saying to the street, what they're saying to investors, what they're saying to the industry as a whole that's important in terms of your strategic direction. You can also ask your boss or others in the organization as to what's important. How do we tie the labor shortage to our strategic plan so we can connect all the dots for them. But ultimately, once you understand what's important, then it's about tying the labor shortage to your to what the executives care about and talking to them. And when you talk to them, it's important to keep a few things in mind. When you make your case, try to talk in their language. So that bridges that gap between what what the solution you want to bring to the table and what they care about. And maybe they care about the labor shortage, but maybe they care about something else, whether that's profits or earnings per share or something along those lines. You can connect the dots back to this because your labor shortage is going to affect any financial metric that they care about.
And Bob, talking their language, I think that goes back to research, right? Absolutely. If you're researching and like getting the intel on what they're saying in meetings or what they're saying in the hallways or just kind of having casual conversations, you can hear their talk track, right? You start to get that. So then their language becomes your language. I think that's something that's really important in that.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. The second thing I recommend when you're talking to an executive is be specific, right? Don't talk around the issue. Don't talk in circles. Be very specific in terms of what you're asking for and why. So that again ties back a little bit into their language, but you don't want to go off on a tangent. You want to stay focused. And then the last thing that's really important with an executive is to be brief, right? You don't need to give them all of the details at first. What you want to do is you want to hit them with the headline. We're connecting the dots from the thing that you care about to the labor shortage to our solution, and we can solve this problem for you. If they're interested, if you get their attention, then they'll start to ask for details. And that's when you can start to kind of peel back the onion a little bit more. But talk their language, be specific, and be brief are going to be the keys to getting your message across. I think the other thing that's really important is that now is the time to act, right? Nobody gets fired for bringing an idea up, right? Even in the most political environments, nobody is going to get fired for saying, "Hey, I think I have a solution to this problem." They may not listen to you if they don't, if you don't hit the mark in terms of connecting the dots. But now is the time to act, and if you act, there's a great reward, right? Then all of a sudden it makes your job a lot easier because you're solving the labor shortage. It's easier to schedule people. It's easier to keep your locations open. And you're also, you're a hero for helping to address a key issue that's affecting the business right now.
Great news for me. This is being recorded, and I just heard that I would not be fired when I bring up really bad ideas. That's what I heard from Bob. Okay, so we've got what we need to do, how we need to align with the executives, and I think there are some big things here. And I think that we've kind of nailed it down to 3 big things that we know we need executive support for, right, Bob? That you got to get to the table with these guys. And I love the idea about speed. Things are changing so fast right now that you've got to be very speedy on this, guys. You have got to start listening and create the talk track now. And then there are these kind of key components, Bob, right, that you're going to need help from your executives.
Yeah. So in terms of the ideas that you can bring to the table, and frankly, the ideas that help solve the labor shortage, it really falls into 3 big buckets. And then I would argue that there's a group of smaller operational things that you can do that maybe create a little bit more of a Band-Aid. But we'll talk about all of this in a little bit more detail. But just to kind of lay the groundwork, the 3 big ideas are: number 1, to raise wages. Number two is to give more hours to existing employees. And number three is to increase the productivity of your staff. Now, none of these things work in a vacuum. None of these things are easy to implement. I just want to be clear about that up front, but all of them will start to address your labor shortage if tackled in the right way and in the right situation.
So I think everybody might be sitting on the call going, okay, raise our wages. Is that really what we need to do? And I think people are already reacting to this, right? So let's break this down. Let's get a little bit deeper into, hey, just raise your wages, because there's more to it than that, right, Bob?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, it's really easy to throw money at the problem. It's easy to say, hey, we're going to raise everybody's wages, but it's not as easy as it sounds, and it may or may not be a solution to the problem. When we think about throwing money at the problem, we need to recognize that raising wages is going to do one of two things. Number one is it's going to actually reduce the number of hours that you have to spend in your labor budget, because maybe your labor budget is an immovable force and it kind of is what it is. So you're kind of creating or perpetuating a labor shortage by spending more per hour. Now you have fewer hours to work. So you need to keep that in mind. In the ideal world, you can increase your labor budget, but that's going to have effects on profits and margins. And that kind of gets into getting that executive buy-in again, right? We need to get the executive buy-in to be able to increase our budget and to recognize the impact of the financial performance of the company. The other thing that happens when you raise wages is it creates something called wage compression. And I know that some of the audience is familiar with that term, but the idea is that if I'm raising my starting wage, the people that are at or below the new starting wage are going to expect to see an increase in their salary as well. So it has this ripple effect, if you will, through especially the hourly workers, but it has a ripple effect to drive people into higher wages across the board. Ultimately, you may not have a choice to raise wages, right? It may be something that for competitive reasons, you need to raise wages. It may be something that minimum wage in certain geographies are going to be going up. And so you're going to need to raise wages as a result of that. And I think that when you look at raising wages as a potential solution, the other thing you need to ask yourself is it going to do enough to attract the workers that I want, right? So today, if my average salary is my average wage is $12 an hour, and I say, well, you know what, I'm going to keep up with, Costco, or I'm going to keep up with Chipotle, and I'm going to raise my wages to $15 an hour as the starting point. Is that going to be enough to be able to attract the workers that might have gone to the Costco or the Chipotle to begin with? Ultimately, I think that raising wages becomes important if you're outside, if you're kind of below average right now, but it's only one arrow in the quiver. And I think it really creates a more of a table stakes environment, unless you're going to go big, right? If you're going to go, like we saw Bank of America announce that they were going to raise their starting wages to $25 an hour by a certain date in the future. Now, admittedly, they're financial services versus retail, but it is a statement of a big move. And I think that if you're making a big move, it can make a big difference. But if you're just going to average or going to the middle, it's about table stakes, an important solution, but probably not the silver bullet, if you will.
Right. So it's something you cannot overlook. Obviously, you need to make sure and you need to have your philosophy of what your compensation plans are going to look like, right? Like where are you going to be? And you have to determine that that's where you're going to sit. And it's okay if you lose some of those candidates because of that, because you're kind of putting the stake in the ground for yourself in this kind of whatever area you want to be in. The other thing I think that makes a big point, Bob, I saw, was it a couple of weeks ago or last week, where there was a smaller chain of chicken shops that were in Texas, and they decided to take some of their 18-year-old part-time workers, and some of them were full-time as well, but give them $50,000 as a starting pay for an assistant manager. They just could not find assistant managers. They needed key holders in the building. And they did that by taking 18-year-olds and making them, giving them $50,000. Now that was their big aha. That's where they wanted to kind of put their foot in the ground for it. But that's what they had kind of decided they were going to hang their hat on. I think that's the same thing here, is find out what your big moment is here, or where am I just going to sit for my comp strategy? And I think that's, again, like you said, it's just one more piece that you're looking at. Just don't overlook it, right? Don't let it it's a thing, I have to deal with it. It's a thing, you do have to deal with it. Now make a plan.
That's right.
Okay. So if we're going to talk about the throwing money at our employees, what about in the past? It was very easy. I mean, I know as a store manager, I'd always say, I've got this, don't worry. I can actually have more revenue, create more revenue, and have better return. I'm just going to give my employees a lot of hours. I'm going to give them all a lot of hours. Everybody's going to get full time, and then we're going to be set. But it didn't really work that way then, and it kind of doesn't work that way now, right? I mean, just throwing hours, that doesn't mean increasing the hours isn't just throwing hours to everyone, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, one easy way to address the labor shortage is to give more hours to your existing employees. But when you actually do that in practicality, you typically run into issues, and those issues fall into a couple of really big buckets, right? So the first issue is, are your workers able to work those additional hours that you give them, right? If you give them one more shift a week, or if you give them a few more hours a shift, are they able to take those hours? And for many people, they may be limited either by family or by school or by their lifestyle, right? We worked with one resort recently who was telling me that they tried to give hours to their existing workers, and what they found out, their workers had no desire to get those additional hours, because why they liked working there is they liked the benefit of being able to use the resort facilities when they weren't working, and so they didn't have any more desire to work any more hours. So you need to do some analysis to really understand, are my workers able to pick up more hours? And the work that we've done on this in the past, whether it's with grocers or specialty retailers or whoever, is we often find that is going to vary a little bit by demographic and by location. So maybe in an urban location where you've got stores or locations that are packed together, relatively close together, it's easy for somebody to go across the street or down the hall in the mall, or a few blocks away, to be able to pick up hours at a different location, or to be able to work in different places. For a lot of people, though, especially as you start getting into more rural environments, the distance between locations, even if it's 5 miles, may be too great because of the dependence on public transportation and things like that. So it is one of those things where you need to do a little bit of that heavy lifting to analyze the makeup of your workforce and understand if they can pick up more hours.
I think too, don't you, on this, Bob, that just everybody doesn't need to go with your old data on this information, right? Because COVID has just tremendously changed where people are living, how they're working, lifestyles, family, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it looks like can you hear me, Robin?
But you are a little frozen.
Yeah, my camera just flipped off, so I'm gonna just keep talking that good old technology. So one of the things that you're absolutely right? The data that you had before COVID is irrelevant today, just like the data that you used for forecasting is irrelevant today. So it's really important that you go out and refresh that information, or refresh what you're looking about your employees. The second thing that I think is vital when you're doing when you're considering this, is to recognize that overtime is not a bad thing. And what I mean by that is that for a lot of organizations, overtime is a 4-letter word. It's something that people really, really dislike because it's unplanned. And I'm sorry, I'm getting some messages on my screen here. I'm going to ignore that for a minute. Technology problems continue, so I'm going to keep going though. But ultimately, when you look at overtime, it is often less expensive to pay overtime than it is to bring in another employee. When you hire an employee, what comes with that is recruiting costs, training costs, loss of productivity. You're going to have to pay benefits. And when you start to add all those things up, overtime can actually be less expensive than hiring somebody new. So There's a big difference between planned overtime and unplanned overtime. And when you're addressing your labor shortage, you should start thinking about how we can plan overtime into our ranks. The last thing you need to consider when you think about how to solve this problem is the technology, right? Simply saying, I'm going to give everybody more hours is not enough. You need to understand how you're going to get them more hours. So in your workforce management system, the first thing you can do is start to look at your shift rules, right? Let's expand the number of hours that we're giving people in a given week from 24 to 32 or 32 to 40, right? So let's start expanding those hours, expanding those rules. But simply writing a new schedule that gives people longer shifts or an extra shift may not be enough. A better solution, and you've heard us talk about this before, but a better solution is to provide your employees access to a mobile shift management solution where they can actually pick up shifts themselves, trade shifts amongst each other. Giving them the power to control their schedules will be vital to getting their buy-in, having them having fewer call-ins, et cetera. So consider all of those things when you're thinking about this particular solution, which is giving more hours.
Perfect. Now you're coming back on, off, on,
Trying
off.
to.
Just so you guys know, there is a thunderstorm going through Bob's area right now. So I already said, have your backup on your phone in case you get completely shut out. So thanks for hanging in there, Bob. Are you still with us?
Trying.
Yep, there you are. Okay, so the third big idea that we talked about was increasing productivity. And I know that we all kind of cringe when we say, you got to do more on less, you got to do more on less. And especially in locations, in the stores and the distribution centers and grocery, wherever I am, I already feel like I'm doing so much more than I've ever done. I feel like I'm doing 2 and 3 jobs that I've never had to do before. Maybe I'm still doing some sort of sanitizing and cleaning that I've never had to do before. So I feel like, is it really about doing more with less, or is there a different way to think about productivity?
Well, a lot of times when I talk to retailers right now, they feel like that they've cut back and cut back and cut back. But the reality is that COVID added a lot of cost to our labor models, right? We're still experiencing what we've called COVID overhead, which is the extra tasks and extra work that's been involved as a result of the pandemic. Now, for many retailers, they've started pivoting and saying, listen, the extra cleaning hours, we're not giving you extra budget for. You've got to fit it into your existing budget. Yeah. But that takes away from selling time. It kind of exacerbates the COVID or the labor shortage in many ways. So one thing you can do is go back and look at your COVID overhead and look at the tasks that have been added by COVID. And I guess that starts to get us a little bit into some of the techniques that we can use to find greater productivity with our employees. So kind of in my mind, there are 2 big buckets of solutions, right? There are the big ideas, and then there are those little ideas that can really produce outsourced gains. The big ideas are really big ideas. They might include, redesigning tasks, eliminating tasks, or redesigning even jobs. And I think that last one is vitally important as retailers start thinking about the future of their stores. You and I were talking about this the other day, Robin, but if you walk into a mall today, now that things have started to reopen, particularly here in the US, a store looks pretty much the same as it did before, with the exception of maybe a couple of plexiglass shields that have been put up, right? Even though the work that's being done in the store is different because you're more dependent on curbside pickup, you're more dependent on omni-channel kind of shipping from the store, we haven't reinvented the stores yet. And that's something that needs to get done. And as we do that, and as we look to see what we're really expecting our employees to do, redesigning the jobs that people are doing in your stores is going to be vital to finding that efficiency. Now, whether you're eliminating tasks or redesigning jobs, these are not quick hits. They're not something that you can implement tomorrow to solve your labor shortage. They're a bit of a roadmap item that we make some adjustments now, which changes the mix of our employees in the store. It's going to have a big impact down the road. So in the short term, the way to fix the problem is to really look for the small things that can produce outside or big gains in terms of how many hours you need and where people spend their time in the store. Because again, all it is improving productivity to address the labor shortage is having your people produce more, whether that's more sales, more stock, whatever that might be. So one of the best techniques for this is to look at the high frequency tasks that happen in your stores.
Yeah.
What is it that happens over and over and over again across all of your locations throughout the day? If you can identify those tasks and find ways to either eliminate the frequency of some of those tasks or to eliminate steps in the task so that it doesn't require a big training to do it different. It's simply just, hey, I'm going to not do this one thing next time I do the task, or do something where you realign and move equipment. So for example, something that we identified for a lot of people with the omni-channel processes is creating a steady, reliable place that they can do packing and shipping from the store rather than having to tear it up and tear it down every day. This can become a big savings in terms of time and effort. So again, reducing the frequency or eliminating steps in high frequency tasks can have a big short-term improvement in terms of the gains.
I think too, I know we're getting close to the end of our webinar, but I think you guys also think about some of these very small things that can happen that you can use as well, right? There's other options that you could start with and get pretty quickly into some changes.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked about the big ideas, improve productivity, giving more hours or raising wages. But like I said at the beginning, there are small things that you can do that will help. They aren't necessarily solutions, but they will help Band-Aid the problem, especially if you're feeling pressure to keep stores, certain locations open.
Yeah.
And to me, those things, and there's a lot of little things that you can do, but some of them that are top of mind for me are, number one, can you change your minimum staffing rules? A lot of stores still have, 2 people as their minimums. It may be 1-to-1 or something along those lines, but how can you kind of pull back even further on minimums without affecting kind of safety or loss prevention and security? The second thing that you might want to consider are there certain areas of the store that you can effectively close, right? That maybe you're staffing somebody in a department right now that you can pull back on, again, as a way to create more space in your schedule and with your current workforce. Another thing, and this one's a little bit harder to implement, but another area to look at is to change your operating hours at your stores, whether that's reducing that or pushing back your open time or pulling in your close time. Can you do that without having an effect on your sales or what the trade-off is between cost and sales? So some of those types of things are some of the, I'll call it low-hanging fruit that you can look at as a short-term Band-Aid until you can start to address the bigger issues.
I think that's great. That's a lot to think about. And I think you guys, that's big impact items. There's things you can do that you're probably already doing today that you just need to think through fully. What's the longer term strategy for you, the longer play on it? And so where do we start, Bob?
Well, I mean, you need to create a plan, right? I mean, that's the easy thing to be able to say. It's the hard thing that to do. And I think what you need to do is, given some of the ideas that we've talked about, you need to actually sit down and start crunching some numbers to understand, well, if we were to raise wages by $2 an hour, what would be the impact on our payroll given our current workforce and whatnot? Or conversely, if I can give more hours to my staff, are they able to pick it up? What's the impact of overtime? Similarly, if I can find, reducing this task by 10%, what's the impact on my labor? And what you'll probably find is that not one size fits all. It's not, I'm going to find all of my savings in one area. It's probably going to be some combination thereof. And to be fair, it's going to be unique to you. I wish I could say, here's a template or here's a playbook, but your particular situation is truly unique to yourself. And you need to recognize that speed is vitally important during this process, but it's also not something that this is not an easy solution. So one of the things that I strongly recommend is that you kind of take some of the lessons that you learned during COVID. I think during COVID, we all learned how agile we can be, how fast we can implement new things, how we can really address and tackle new problems. Well, I don't mean to be black or dark about this, but kind of the labor shortage is your next pandemic, right? It's the
Mhm.
next big problem that you've got to tackle and deal with. And I believe that to be successful, you need to do the analysis, you need to build a plan, but then you need to work quickly to test and learn. Try something out in a market. Does that work and help address the labor shortage? And if so, blow it out to everybody else. And if not, you know, go back to round two. Moving quickly through this is going to be vitally important because everybody is competing for the same talent and the same staff right now. And while I recognize that almost everybody on this call is not in HR, all this labor shortage has a big impact on keeping your stores open, scheduling your people, and ultimately helping you meet the sales goals that you have for your company and for your stores.
That's so true. And you guys can see, I mean, we're at the bottom of the hour. We could keep going and talking so much more in depth about what you should be thinking of and what you should do. And we're very excited about that because we would love to connect with you in any level that we can. If reach out to us on email, schedule a call just to chat about where you are and what you're working on. So how can we help you? As usual, we're not going to leave you hanging. Now, it seems so easy. Strategy and roadmap, we can help you with that. Your strategy and your roadmap will be bigger and more winding and more it will be the biggest roadmap that you're going to have to continually change over time in dealing with this labor shortage, because it's not going to stop now. You all of a sudden, some of you have big back to schools. It's July, you guys. And then you have August and September and getting ready for holiday. Who knows? This could be another one of the biggest holidays ever because people are antsy to get out and shop this year. Create your roadmap. Let us help you with that because this isn't just your normal roadmap, right? Building your business case. It could be a risk management case, an opportunity case, whatever your company calls it. This isn't your normal business case either. Aligning your talk track with your executives, being brief, using the right language with them so that there are key elements that you can go in and work on right away, that with those smaller impact items and also with the ones that are bigger. And then implementing the change. Most of you are doing the job of one or two more people than you've normally done. You're short-staffed as it is yourself. So don't try to do all of this on your own because we know how tough it can be. And you want the success, right? It's the same thing. Employee engagement at the end of this is essential. So Bob and I would like to thank you for joining us today. And please reach out to us in any way possible that you can. Like I said, here's our emails. We'd love to just chat with you to see where you are on this journey and what other exciting ideas that you might have that we could share with others. So thank you all and have a wonderful day wherever you are.